Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to On the Record. I'm Amanda Barron, a very special edition of On the Record, a live edition on this primary election night in the state of Ohio. Every night at 8 o'clock on your local Nexstar Stations app, we have a conversation with the people who are making headlines all across the region. And tonight, our focus will key in on what is happening in Ohio. Today's primary is setting up what's expected to be one of the most expensive races for the U.S. Senate this year as Republicans try to hold on to the chamber during a difficult midterm year. And we can tell you tonight that matchup is being figured out. We know that Sherrod Brown, of course, is taking that nomination, and he is very happy about that. We're going to get your reaction as we move through this evening. We also know that the former biotech billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy will face a challenge from the state's former health director as he seeks to keep the governor's office in the GOP's hands. Amy Acton, of course, is already having her team go to the podium. We're going to hear from her coming up in just a little bit. But it is certainly a big night on all fronts in Ohio on this primary election night. And joining us now to talk more about what it all means is Asher Peck. He's an adjunct faculty member of political science, a professor at the College of Arts and Sciences at Rio Grande. He joins us now. All right, Professor, thank you so much for being here tonight. We're so glad to welcome you onto the program, the first live on the record, I might add. Tell us a little bit about your top line thoughts as we come on the air this evening about this primary election day.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, they've already called a couple of races, and it's very early. You know, the precincts just closed about 30 minutes ago. But the main thing in doubt tonight isn't so much as the final outcome and who the victor is. It's more so about turnout, the candidate strength in regards to those like Mr. Ramaswamy, who had a primary challenger, and whether there's any factional shifts within the parties. And in a state like Ohio that's trended heavily Republican in over the past 2 decades, and especially the Senate headline winners as those that we'll be seeing over the next couple hours.
All right, so it is obviously no surprise Amy Acton took to the podium early tonight as this was a, kind of a foregone conclusion in her case. As we set the stage, because for the general election, it's almost as if this primary election really has just been like the longest general election ever in some watchers' minds, because Vivek Ramaswamy has really had his sights set on Acton since the beginning. And he has a challenger tonight, a lesser known candidate from Northeast Ohio. And I want you to talk a little bit about him, what he brought to the table, and what you think this might mean. Like, do you think the people who voted for this gentleman will stick with the Republican Party, or do you think that they will split that vote and go with Acton?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and one of the most pressing going into the general election here in the fall, which is roughly 182 days away. I think that the vast majority of them will be able to be brought back into the fold of the Republican Party. Now, again, there's still some unknowns here. How much of the share of the total vote do they make up? I think if Mr. Ramaswamy receives less than 70% of the overall vote, which I think is a very extreme situation tonight, if that's the case, then I think he's got a real problem going into the general election against a relatively strong Democratic candidate in Dr. Acton, who did not have in regards to a challenger. Now, again, if that number is up closer, 85% or so, which I think is probably the realistic territory that he'll end up tonight, I don't think there's much of an issue, right? Most of these individuals that voted for his lesser-known competitor, there's some reasons why they did that that we could discuss here, but they do represent a bit of a dangerous faction or problematic faction for Republicans moving forward. And the primary reason that I heard from many of his supporters on internet forums and Twitter and whatnot was on the basis of Mr. Ramaswamy's ethnicity and religion, right? Not necessarily policy differences, although there was a few that some of his supporters did mention, H-1B visas, for example, data centers, things of that nature. There was certainly some dangerous tendencies or conversations that were had by some of his supporters.
All right.
And him himself ultimately as well.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry. Casey Putsch is that challenger tonight, and you mentioned some of the things that he really zeroed in on during that race when it came to Vivek Ramaswamy, especially when it comes to religion. And I noticed in reading some of the paperwork, some of the press releases that we've seen over the last couple of days, that when it comes to Ramaswamy's running mate, in this case, that's one of the top line things that you read was religion. And do you think that will be a big factor for voters moving forward in the next 182 days? But who's counting?
That's the $1 million question. I think for maybe 5% I think the vast majority though will come to terms with it, and that's primarily just because if you look at if you're a Casey Putsch voter here in Ohio and you're looking at who he's running against, which one are you going to pick, right? They're going to still side with the Republican candidate, even though maybe he doesn't necessarily represent or embody some of the things that they wish he did, but primarily white Christian background. But there's certainly some other trends here I've noticed in Ohio. Anti-Semitism, right, is on the rise in some circles. That's something that Ramaswamy's challenger certainly embodied as well. But again, I don't think we'll look at the final numbers here, when they're finalized. But I don't think it's enough to completely just say, oh, he's in big trouble going into the fall. I think it's something that he will be able to get over.
One of the things that we're noticing right now, especially as you look at the situation in Iran and you look at gas prices, President Trump's numbers, popularity in some circles, even from supporters, is declining right now. And obviously Vivek Ramaswamy has the backing of President Trump. How is that going to play into the general election?
I think the answer to that probably lies in what happens to gas prices over the next few months, right? I think there is a bit of a blowback that I've heard from a lot of individuals that either lean right or are on the right that have said, look, this isn't what we voted for. We voted for a guy that said he was going to lower gas prices, he was going to lower the price of groceries right at the store, and that's not what we're seeing. So that is a factor here in Ohio, not just in Ohio though, all around the country. We'll really have to look and see what the favorability rating does over the coming months to see actually if candidates are able to separate the Trump endorsement from the actual candidates themselves. And again, I go back to what I said about the Casey Putsch voter, right? Do they really believe that the alternative is the better option, right? Which one do they agree with more? And so that's why I don't think that gas prices or higher prices at the grocery store are necessarily going to break Ramaswamy's campaign. Again, just because I've seen voters so far have separated a little bit, federal level and state level in regards to the policies.
Let's talk about
and the higher prices.
Okay, let's talk about COVID, because it's like that 500-pound gorilla that we can't seem to escape. But obviously, Amy Acton became a household name during the COVID-19 pandemic, and Vivek Ramaswamy, and that's when people became comfortable with her and found her to be a place where you could get some information and perhaps in a time that was tough for people, or in some cases frightening. I hate to use that word, but in some cases frightening. Like they felt this sense of calm. And obviously she was working with the Republican governor at the time. Vivek Ramaswamy has kind of, challenged some of her some of the decisions that were made during COVID, that even Governor DeWine has come out and said, hey, like those were my calls. I was taking under advisement from her. How much do you think the pandemic is going to play into this 2026 gubernatorial election?
It's not often that you see an event from 5+ years ago lead into a race for governor, right? So this is a very rare example of that, generally speaking. I think that on the right, there's still some very strong feelings about that. And when I say right, I'm meaning those that tend to be closer to the middle, more moderate voters that lean right. We're definitely seeing some of them still hold a little bit of resentment towards her, especially small business owners, right? That say, look, some of these shutdowns might have been unfair. And again, is it fair to blame her? She made those recommendations. We can have those debates. She made those recommendations, but it's ultimately Governor DeWine who actually implemented it, right? So how much the average voter holds against her, I will say one thing that we've noticed in polling over the past year, especially the last 6 months, is that women, regardless of political affiliation in Ohio, have tended to sway more towards her as the month and ultimately the almost year has went by of this campaign season. Oh. So we'll see how that plays out. But COVID, I think, will definitely be more of a factor than other events from, say, 5 or 6 years ago would be. I don't think it's as much of an issue now as when this race ultimately began over a year ago now. I think voters are tending to look more towards other issues like data centers, the future of Ohio, economic development, things of that nature, and really moving forward instead of reflecting on something that happened so many years ago.
That's very interesting. All right, let's turn our attention now to the Senate race. This is a marquee race. Sherrod Brown and Jon Husted, both men have been there, both obviously very much want the job. Jon Husted was appointed by the governor when J.D. Vance became the vice president of the United States. And of course, Sherrod Brown. I grew up in Ohio. Can't remember a time when Sherrod Brown wasn't in office in that capacity. Talk about what this race, what is it going to take in this particular race to make it across the finish line?
A lot of money, definitely a lot of money from both Republicans and Democrats. This will be the most, or at least one of the most expensive Senate races in the country. The Sherrod Brown really, and kudos to the Democrats for getting him to jump back in the political arena. Sherrod Brown is, by most metrics, the only Democrat capable of winning a statewide Senate race in the state of Ohio. This is a state that, Trump won by, double-digit points. This is a state where he actually outperformed Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee in 2024, right? So he embodies a little bit of sort of that old era of Democrat that Ohio found very palatable, right? So his sort of version of economic populism, we'll see how successful that is in regards to reaching voters, especially in Southern Ohio and Northeast Ohio, where we've seen Republicans have made some pretty serious gains over the past decade. So that is really his best bet right there, is leaning into his version of economic populism, appealing to the working man, the sort of Rust Belt area that had its heart ripped out in at least in some capacity. The other thing I will say that could help him, and also Dr. Acton in the governor's race, is some polls have shown that Democrats tend to be more enthused or more motivated about getting out and engaging in civics and voting in elections, or even donating to candidates. There's one poll in particular that came out sometime last month, I believe it was late last month, from Bowling Green State University. And it showed that about 60% of Democrats said they were motivated or very motivated to get involved in this election cycle, compared to under 40%. I think the actual number was about 37% of Republicans who could say the same thing. So that is, if those numbers continue to go that way in that direction, right, or maybe even they increase for Democrats, then that would spell real trouble for both Senator Husted and Mr. Ramaswamy.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a motivation to get to the polls is really something that can, obviously, as we know, make or break it. Can you look into your crystal ball here, if you would like to pull that out and tell us on this day, 182 days away, what do you think is going to happen in November?
That is a great question. I love being put on the hot seat here.
Right.
That way I can, people can come back and tell me in 182 days how right or wrong I was. If they tell me I'm right, that's fine. But I do believe that Republicans will retain the executive offices that they've had. And I do believe that Jon Husted will be elected as the next U.S. Senator from Ohio. Now, again, I know that's a little bit of a hot take. There's a lot of folks, even on the right. I've talked to some Republican operatives who are very worried, especially about the Senate race. On the flip side, I've talked to some Democrats, right? And they are very, very optimistic, and they think that this is their opportunity to flip a Republican seat in a Trump state and potentially maybe take back the majority in the United States Senate. I just don't believe that Ohio is up for grabs in the sense of either Senator Brown or Dr. Acton winning. And all of the other statewide races, which I know we haven't been able to get to due to the time, but I don't think there's a significant enough threat from any of the Democratic candidates to overtake any of these Republicans, and in many cases, Republicans who have relatively strong name ID across the state. There's a sort of revolving door among the statewide executive officials. I just don't think, I think Democrats will have a much better year in Ohio than they have had for the past decade or so. I just don't think it's quite enough that's going to put them over the edge of flipping one, or let alone more executive offices or for the Senate race.
Interesting. All right, we're gonna check back with you. So mark this date down because we'll have you back for the general. But in the meantime, I want to ask you about this. Ohio was such a bellwether for so many years. It was kind of like you knew early in the election, like whatever Ohio did, that was what was going to like stamp. You know, we knew how the nation would go. It's not really the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is completely flipped. I mean, even just, I'm a relatively young guy, but even growing up, right, it was known as, it's a toss-up. There's, I grew up with a Democratic governor, right, and various other Democratic officials. And then for the past 2 decades, again, it's all been Republican. A lot of that comes down to the rise of globalization. We see that jobs, manufacturing, Republican candidates, and especially populist-leaning candidates can really dig in on that and say, look, your jobs were taken away. Now, again, Republicans and Democrats were part of that, right? But Republicans were just a little better at messaging in regards to saying, we understand you, you've been left behind, and we're here to help, right? And I think that's one of the most significant factors. Not to mention just the overall decades-long sorting of the general public that's occurred at the same time. Ohio is still a very rural state, which votes overwhelmingly Republican, of course. The urban areas, Republicans have been able to have some success in the suburban areas. Of course, that's starting to change. If that continues to drop off, then we might see that Democrats start having a chance at actually flipping maybe multiple seats in the state in regards to the executive position. But as for now, again, Republicans were just, I think, more successful at getting that messaging out there and saying, look, you've been left behind. We're going to bring jobs back. We're going to try to bring more opportunity and education to the state. And I think until the messaging can shift on that, or maybe there's new issues that can come to the forefront that the Republicans aren't as good at targeting the voters, then I think we're going to still see Ohio be a very red state. And of course, Donald Trump is one of the biggest factors in what led Ohio to become such a red state. If you look at his numbers in any election versus the numbers of other Republicans in primary or general elections, you're going to see that they're running a couple points, sometimes even several points behind the president.
Okay. Asher Peck is a PhD candidate and adjunct faculty professor of political science at Rio Grande. And we're so glad that you're here. You love Election Day. Obviously, you love politics. You love studying the science of all of this. When it comes to voter participation, though, and people being engaged in a civic manner, what message do you want to send to folks?
Yeah, my message is one of the most easiest yet most meaningful things you can do as an American, as an Ohioan, or as a West Virginian is actually go vote. I went to vote today. It took me from the moment I walked out of my car, or parked it, and walked back into my car after I voted. It took about 5 minutes. I know I realize that's not necessarily the case if you live in a larger urban area. But again, there is no cost. You go in, you vote. It takes a few seconds. But also not just vote, right? Don't just vote. Actually educate yourself on what the races are, what the issues are, who the candidates are, what they believe, and make sure they identify with what you want. One thing that I've seen both as an educator and just someone who observes politics is Americans are not all that knowledgeable of who represents them and also how our system of government works. And so if our republic is actually going to last, and if it's actually not only going to last, but be effective and efficient, then it takes all of us, right? The United States isn't bound by any one race, religion, a creed, or ethnicity, right? What we're bound by is our commitment to our founding documents, the United States Constitution, our Bill of Rights, the promises that are contained in the Declaration of Independence. These are the things that bound us together as Americans. And when we actually research what these documents mean and what's expected of us as a citizen, and also what's expected of those in government, then we are going to have a better government. But again, it takes all of it. Voting is the first. There's many steps. Voting is the first step and is ultimately the easiest step. So even if you didn't go out and vote in this primary election here in Ohio, make sure you take advantage of it. If you're not registered, get registered to vote and ultimately go vote in the general election.
Asher Peck from Rio Grande University, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Primary election day is upon us. We're going to take a quick break. We're back in just a minute. Welcome back. Results are continuing to pour in for the Ohio primary election. The Associated Press has called Vivek Ramaswamy as the Republican nominee for Ohio governor. And the AP has also called Amy Acton the Democratic nominee. That came in very quickly tonight. As I mentioned, Acton is at her headquarters and she is speaking right now. Let's listen in.
They are scrappy, guys. We've been fighting a lot of fights over a year and a half. We've done some things people might not have expected. And I just want to thank my team from the bottom of my heart. They give me so much to be able to do what I do. And finally, thank you to all the Ohioans out there who may be feeling invisible or alone. My promise to you is this: no one will ever be invisible to me. No one will be invisible to me in this state. Ohioans, everyone, this is our moment. Ohio is in play. I believe in the promise of this state. I see the dream of a new sun rising. I always think about our state seal, and you always watch that sun, and you might be seeing it on. That sun is rising in Ohio, and I believe in the promise. I believe it is time for a change, and Ohioans everywhere are moving in a movement. And we are going to create our future together. I need you to help me spread this word. Keep joining this fight, actonforgovernor.com. And I need you to know I will be fighting with you every step of the way. Thank you, everyone. Let's go do it. Thank you.
Amy Acton speaking at her headquarters. We can't tell you Vivek Ramaswamy wrapped up just as we were coming back, so we're going to get you more of what he has to say coming up in just a little bit. As we know, it's going to be a spirited campaign as we move into November, but again, we'll have more for you tonight at 10 and 11 with Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's check in with Jackson Rosinski with the latest on the governor's race. Jackson is in Ironton tonight. What kind of reaction are you hearing from people?
Yeah, overall, Amanda, throughout the day today, it's been a positive reaction. The polls, as you know, have just closed here at 7:30 tonight. And as I was speaking, to voters today, many of them were excited to cast their ballots and see the results. And now the race for governor is on. The unopposed Democrat, as you mentioned, Amy Acton, is looking ahead to her new opponent, who was declared a winner by the Associated Press just over 20 minutes after the polls closed. And Vivek Ramaswamy will lead the charge for the Republican Party, widely known as a backer of President Donald Trump, and was born in Cincinnati. His campaign for governor has revolved around affordability, opportunity, and reviving the American dream for Ohioans. And we spoke with local voters on their thoughts on the governor's race earlier today.
The Ohio governor's race is really what is on the people's hearts and minds. We are concerned, we are worried. If you look at the feedback, you look at the Facebook pages, you look at the posts, you look at the news that's coming out about each candidate. And again, Ohio is more concerned about the governor's race right now.
Ramaswamy's opponent, Amy Acton, ran her campaign unopposed. She's a physician and public health expert from Ohio. She also served as director of the Ohio Department of Health under Governor Mike DeWine from 2019 to 2020. Her campaign was emphasizing health, education, affordability, and giving power back to Ohio communities. Now, as the night continues on, we'll obviously have more results online and on the air later tonight, as you mentioned, at 10 and 11 o'clock. And I will still remain here in Ironton to update the folks at home as well, just for everything that has been happening throughout the day here. But for now, live in Ironton, Jackson Rosinski for On the Record.
All right, Jackson, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it. A busy night in so many places, but a primary night that really is getting wrapped up quite early, 8:27. So many of the results coming in. You can see all of those results with your local election headquarters on our website, WOWKTV.com, or your local Nexstar station's website. We also want to let you know that we will continue to bring you more sound. Of course, we want to make sure that you hear from Vivek Ramaswamy, and we will make sure you do that on the website as well. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you back here next time.